Peaceful demonstrations seeking democracy and social change in Yemen quickly turned bloody. Al-Ramesh, a poet, narrates his ordeal when he was captured and tortured by armed groups.
حصلي هذه الكارثة البشعة التي لا تروي أي إنسان وتعرضت لقطع لساني وعانيت من أطراف لا أعلم بها بحد ذاتها ولكنه اللي حصل لي قصدوا قطع لساني رسالة لتقسيم الأفواه سواء كانوا شعراء أو صحفيين أو كتاب أو أدباء أو أي إنسان يفصح ويتكلم ويعبر عن رأيه.
Al-Ramesh says he fears for his life and security and wants protection. He claimed he was attacked by supporters of the opposition. It is civilians, not the armed factions, that are most at risk. 12-year-old Salim Al-Harazin talks of the fateful Friday, March the 18th, named Dignity Day, when he lost his eyesight during the demonstrations. On the same day that Salim was injured, about 50 were killed and hundreds injured. A UN human rights team which visited the country in June says several ongoing conflicts are pushing Yemen to the brink of civil war. The team's assessment is that armed groups have infiltrated the protests.
We're telling the armed opposition to pull out from the sit-ins and the peaceful demonstrations, because by being present within those demonstrations, they're turning them into violent demonstrations, and they're giving the state then the reason to say these are not unarmed civilians, these are violent demonstrations, and we need to protect public buildings, and therefore we need to resort to not just policing methods, but more forceful methods, including lethal force.
The UN team believes that the government should desist from using excessive force on civilians, such as live ammunition. The three-member team was sent by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights to assess the situation. The team recommends further investigations to be conducted by the international community. Despite the violence inflicted on civilians, they remain determined to continue their protests to bring social change.
اليمن كلهم خرجوا من أجل البحث عن حريتهم عن كرامتهم. نحن نرحب بهذه البعثة التي ستظهر للعالم مستوى الجرائم الذي يقوم بها نظام علي عبد الله صالح. كنا نتمنى أن تكون هذه التحقيق كذلك حول ما قبل.
The UN team, which spent 10 days in the country, warns that the political impasse is creating a humanitarian crisis.
We heard from WHO that immunization systems were breaking down and diseases were coming back. So a huge humanitarian crisis in the making, hundreds of thousands of internally displaced, and the numbers growing.
The question that concerns many of Yemen's neighbours is whether the violent clashes and the measures taken to clamp down on pro-democracy protests will lead to a descent into lawlessness and eventually a failed state, like neighbouring Somalia.
The international community needs to be helping Yemen to overcome the difficult period it's going through at the moment, because if we can't find political solutions that bring everybody around the table to discuss the problems, and if we can't ensure there's respect for human rights and for freedom of expression in Yemen, then clearly the dangers are the violence will escalate and we will see a breakup of the country.